Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you've got that GE-EG-41 exam coming up, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to do a super focused, high-speed revision session on the absolute core concepts you've got to know. So let's dive right in and get you ready for that exam. Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to take a journey from the really big picture, how language shapes our society, all the way down to the tiny individual sounds that build our words. By the end of this, I want you to look at this question and feel totally confident that the answer is a big, loud yes. So first up, we're looking at the big picture, how language actually works out there in the real world. Why doesn't everyone speak the exact same way? This is such a fundamental concept, and it's a real favorite for those opening exam questions, so let's make sure we have this totally locked down. Let's start with a classic distinction, standard language versus dialect. Think of a standard language as the version that gets written down in textbooks, the one you hear on the news. It's been codified, meaning it has official grammar rules and dictionaries, and it definitely carries a certain prestige. A dialect, on the other hand, is simply how a specific group of people speak. And here is the key insight for your exam. Linguistically, no dialect is better or worse than any other. The difference is purely about social and political power. So, picture this. Two different groups of people meet, maybe at a port to trade some goods. They don't have a language in common at all. So how do they communicate? Well, they get creative. They develop a pidgin, a simplified, functional mashup of a language built for a very specific purpose. So how does a pidgin actually form? Well, it all starts with contact and a real need to communicate. The groups strip down the grammar to the absolute essentials and borrow vocabulary from each other's languages. But here's the number one most important defining feature. A pidgin has no native speakers. It's always a second language that people learn for a practical reason. This leads us to a really fascinating linguistic question. What happens when this simple, functional, get-the-job-done language is all a child hears from the moment they're born? What does their brain do with that? And the answer is, it becomes a Creole. This is where we see the incredible, mind-blowing power of the human brain for language in action. Kids don't just copy the simplified pidgin. Their brains instinctively expand it, adding complex grammar and a much richer vocabulary. They literally transform it into a complete, stable, natural language. Now, this comparison table is pure exam gold, so let's break it down. The biggest difference? Native speakers. Pidgins have none, Creoles do. And from that one fact, everything else follows. A pidgin's grammar is simple, its vocabulary is limited. A Creole, on the other hand, develops complex grammar and a huge vocabulary, ready for any situation you can think of. This amazing process is called creolization. All right, so we've seen how language works in society. Now let's zoom way, way in. We're moving from the level of whole communities right down to the fundamental building blocks of language itself, words. This is the field we call morphology. First, let's get a really crucial distinction straight. We all know what a word is, right? It's the smallest piece of language that can stand on its own. But a morpheme, that's the smallest unit of meaning. Take the word dogs. It's just one word, yeah? But it has two morphemes. Dog, which means the animal, and that little S on the end, which carries the meaning of more than one. Now, this table breaks down one of the most important distinctions in all of morphology. On one side, we have inflectional morphemes. These are just grammatical tweaks, things like adding ed for the past tense or s for a plural. Notice how walk and walked are both still the same core verb. But on the other side, you have derivative morphemes. These guys are word creators. They fundamentally change a word, like making happy into unhappy, or even changing its category, like turning the adjective happy into the noun happiness. So how do we actually form new words? Turns out there are a whole bunch of ways. We've got affixation, just adding parts like un or ness. Compounding, sticking two words together to make sunflower. Blending, like smog from smoke and fog. Clipping, like ad from advertisement. Conversion, where we turn a noun like email into a verb. And then there's the really weird one, suppletion, where the word just completely changes, like go becoming went. All right, let's look at three special cases that examiners absolutely love. First up is the portmanteau-morph. Just think of it like packing two items into one box. It's a single form that represents multiple morphemes all at once. The classic example is from French. The word "o" is actually a mashup of "a," meaning two, and "le," meaning the. Next up, we've got the zero-morph, which is kind of tricky because, well, it's invisible. This is a morpheme that definitely has meaning, but it has no sound. Think about one sheep, two sheep. The meaning of plural is clear as there for that second sheep, but we don't actually add an S sound. Linguists show this by using a null symbol, representing a meaning that exists in our minds, even if it doesn't have a physical form. And finally, the empty morph, which is the exact opposite of the zero-morph. This one has a physical form, a sound, but it carries zero actual meaning. For instance, in I helped him fill the form, that too is totally optional. You can say I helped him fill the form and the meaning is identical. The two is basically just an empty placeholder. All right, we've covered society and we've covered words. Now let's get down to the most basic, fundamental level of all, the physical sounds of speech. This is the world of phonetics and phonology. The most important idea in this entire section is the phoneme. Now, it's not just any random speech sound. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that can actually change the meaning of a word. You can think of it as a mental blueprint for a sound that your language uses to tell words apart. And this slide gives us the perfect proof. Pat and bat are what we call a minimal pair. They are absolutely identical except for that one single sound at the beginning. The fact that swapping a p sound for a b sound creates a totally new word is concrete evidence that p and b are two separate, meaning-making phonemes in English. This whole idea leads us to the concept of distribution. When two sounds like p and b can show up in the exact same spot to create different words, we say they are in contrastive distribution. This proves they're separate phonemes. But sometimes you have two sounds that are just slightly different versions of the same phoneme. We call those allophones. And they will be in complementary distribution, which basically means wherever you find one, you will never find the other. Now, sounds don't just float around on their own. They get organized into syllables. A syllable has an optional beginning, which we call the onset. Then it has the rhyme, which is the mandatory core. And the rhyme itself is made of the nucleus, that's the vowel sound, and an optional ending, the coda. Let's apply this to a really complex example just to see how it works. The word strengths is just one single syllable. Its onset is that three-consonant cluster, stra. The nucleus is the core vowel, e. And the coda is another massive three-consonant cluster, unks. It's a great reminder of just how packed those optional parts of the syllable can get. Now, beyond individual sounds or segments, we have what are called suprasegmental features. These are features that apply to whole syllables, words, or even entire phrases. A good way to think of it is as the melody and the rhythm of speech. Let's quickly clarify two key suprasegmentals that students often mix up. Stress is all about the emphasis on a syllable within a word. Changing the stress can change the word's meaning or its class, like the verb to record versus the noun a record. Intonation, on the other hand, is the pitch pattern, the melody of a whole sentence. For example, a rising pitch at the end of a sentence usually signals a question in English. All right, let's bring all of this together and wrap up with the key things you need to remember. We have covered a huge amount of ground today, from the social power that decides what a dialect is, all the way down to the atoms of language in a single syllable. And the crucial point is this. Linguistics isn't just a set of rules you have to memorize. It's a toolkit for understanding our most fundamental human ability. So as you go into your exam, don't just see isolated facts. Ask yourself, how do these concepts connect? How does social status influence what we call standard? How do the sounds of phonology build the morphemes we just studied? Seeing those connections, that's the real key to success. Thanks for joining this explainer, and the very best of luck.
Tears of sorrow, like it